list, I believe, and then the Jerry Rig Carpenter as the one of where some people used to slot in Wild Growth. So it's just more card draw, which you like to see because this deck is all about finding the Anaconda. No Claw Machine in the version either, so it is all about having Anaconda, and it's right there in the opener with the Overgrowth. Already looking good from DragonMan over here. Swidz gonna keep only the quest, which I'm not surprised about whatsoever. Against Druids of pretty much any sort, you want to hit the early minions, that curve, get the turbo quest done, and make sure you have all the 2/2s on board before DragonMan can start popping off with Glowflies.
Yeah, and we have seen an awful lot of that so far. I think throughout round 1, every time we were dipping in with a Quest Warrior, it was the smooth curve of Pirates. And then through round 2, we started to see just a few more of those frustrating draws where even the players who build a very aggressive version of the deck with tons of Pirates in there do still have a few of those brick draws that they can hit, as we saw from Idaho on a couple of occasions, I think, and a few other players as well. But specifically against a deck like Celestial Druid, you do want to be getting that aggressive curve as fast as humanly possible. And Swidz here picking up the Bloodsail deck hand did save an otherwise quite slow and clunky looking hand overall, I would say.
Yeah, and from his perspective, probably happy to see the attack buff land on that earliest minion here. But for DragonMan, he does have the Lunar Eclipse to deal with it. Not going to use that this turn, though, because he wants to maintain the Nature Studies discount for that Overgrowth. Stage Dive is the draw for Swidz here, which can pick up either another copy of the Stonewall Anchorman or the Blade Master Samuro. It feels like that card's just being slotted in decks where it really has had no business. People taking a leaf out of Mercenaries, perhaps, and running Samuro and everything.
Yeah, if we suddenly just see random Zyrellas appearing in people's decks as well, then we'll really just start to have a talk.
Wow, you're out of the loop. Zyrella has not been meta in Mercenaries for quite some time.
I am well aware. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Comedic license, I suppose we will call that one.
Right, Swidz going to overwrite the hatchet now just for the sake of getting a minion on board. I completely agree. You don't have the time to milk the value out of every single weapon. That gets the Corrupt online and keeps the quest rolling. But DragonMan, like a true APAC player, playing down not quite trees, but they're trees in spirit.
They are, yes. Interesting choices here off the studies. I think it will just end up being the Moonlit Guidance here. There are a lot of ways that you can go with this to make incredibly oppressive plays on the following turn. He's really not that far away either from just doing disgusting things with Lady Anaconda. Swidz was throwing up the prayer hands on the previous turn, but he's being hit with the Glowfly here, which means he's going to be immediately on the back foot, and you know what he needs here, Gia.
Here we go. It is the flip. 50-50 for other Anchorman or Blade Master Samuro. And this is a corrupted Stage Dive, so the Samuro will be able to clear everything if it is the pick. And it does come off the top. DragonMan waving. I think he knew. Oh man, that's the board gone in the blink of an eye. And DragonMan does have Anaconda Germination, but not quite that much card draw to go with her. Moonlit Guidance is an arcane spell, not nature, so doesn't get hit by the Anaconda discount.
That's right. Still plenty of pop-off potential, but he's going to need some help from the rest of his deck at this point. Not to mention the sheer amount of damage he is taking here. He's going to have to lead out. Okay, Fungal Fortunes is huge. Now he can go Coin, Innovate, Anaconda.
And then Lunar Germination, Solar, Fungal. That is the deck drawn.
Yeah, luxury of having both Germinations in hand is that he can just use both Germinations manually, which means, as Gio was saying, can preserve the Solar for that Fungal Fortunes. Hugely important with an empty hand like this, because it just doubles his chances of actually getting something game-ending in this position, and that something does not need to be much from this position. Solar again! The world is his oyster.
Oh my gosh, and he just gets the other copy of the Fungal Fortunes because of the Moonlit Guidance aura effect. It's just too much is happening, Sottle. I don't think Swidz can come back. He's not running Brawl or anything like that. This is the probably the most aggressive iteration of the Pirate Warrior, which is strange to say because it's still running Lord Barov, Samuro, and the Shiver Their Timbers in the deck. However, that's not nearly enough removal to get through this, even if Barov comes off the top. There's not the AoE to go alongside it, and that is a Maddest Bomber as well, on top of everything.
I mean, new card. That's what we're here for, right? That's the exciting part of this turn for sure. Okay. There's a Barov, but there's no real way to interact with it. But yeah, if you were looking for like relevant things after the initial Anacondra pop-off, which was of course the game-winning thing, the fact that he hit the other Germination immediately was huge, because that was the Germination that put the Cenarians down to 0, right? So then at that point, even with 0 mana, even without hitting Lightning Bloom, he was able to just continue to go solo Cenarian.
DragonMan is such an aggressive prayer. It's just funny. He's just praying, okay, no Barov. He sees the Barov, but there's no activator for it. No provoke, no shiver their timbers to actually kill off the Barov. So Swidz has to manually get rid of these Anacondras. DragonMan, don't concede. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have it.
DragonMan's like, oh yeah, I clearly lose from this position just because all of my 90 power on board has 1 health. You're chilling. It's fine.
No activator.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's more like it. Not sure about that. Maybe take it back a step. But okay, we're good now. There we go.
Subtle, I'm so excited to have this guy in GM. I'm going to be so entertained. There's a concede.
Well, that was a roller coaster of emotions, Gia. Yeah, indeed. You are right. He does appear to be a very entertaining character, a very aggressive prayer as well. We did see your prayer technique as well while you were playing Mercenaries. Much more zen than what we saw there from DragonMan. But in the end, his prayers were answered and yours were not. So maybe you have a thing or two to learn about technique.
Yeah, I've got to start shaking the prayer hands as well. It cannot be stationary. But that just is game 1 so far. In classic APAC fashion, the glow flies into the Mega Anacondra pop-off turn. Just cleanly done. And showcasing the power of Moonlit Guidance even in older archetypes, right? Even though it's not a nature spell, it can get you a nature spell. And if you've got enough Anacondras, everything costs 0. And like you said, the world is your oyster. 1 game in the books for DragonMan, but what's it gonna be next? Are we gonna see Brutes, maybe?
I mean, it's very, very possible, right? We're kind of in the same scenario where we've seen through multiple series throughout the day where these players with the combo deck lineup have actually been performing based on our broadcast sample size, which isn't always representative of the field as a whole. They've actually been performing pretty well against the aggro decks on the other side. So it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. This is a slightly adapted list of the Brute Demon Hunter from DragonMan to what we have seen previously. It is back to the Lion's Frenzy build as opposed to the hybrid build with Il'gynoth that we saw every once in a while, and it has found room for that double copy of Need for Greed as well, which I think is an interesting addition.
I just feel that it's kind of thematic of DragonMan's entire lineup. All 4 of his decks are archetypes that existed months ago at the beginning of United and Stormwind, and all 4 of them have slotted in some cards from the mini set. Moonlit Guidance in the Druid, Need for Greed in this Brute Demon Hunter, the Blackwater Cutlass in the Garrote Rogue, and the Shadowblade Slingers in the Handlock. So DragonMan is just more of a refiner, it seems like. He knows the main game plan of these decks inside and out. He's just thought that they've increased in power level just a little bit with some of these new cards, but the core is the same. It's all about getting the Brutes down online as soon as possible, getting the efficient card draw, and that usually comes in the form of shuffling in some soul fragments and getting those to be part of your Brute discount. So that's why we're still seeing the double Spirit Jailers and 1 Soul Shear in this list.
It does feel like a very long time since I've had to remember that soul fragments were relevant to quest procs. Like, where? Because even after it switched to the hybrid, right, like the soul fragments were one of the things that bit the dust to make room for the Il'gynoth pieces. So this like classic build of Brute Demon Hunter. Quite some time since we have seen it, but remember it was basically a Masters Tour where this deck had its coming out party in the first place, right? With Xblyzes going infinite win rate on rank 1 legend with the deck right before submission, baiting tons of people, including himself, into submitting the deck, and then dropping very early, even though the deck did stand the test of time, was adapted a few times over the course. But it'd be interesting to see if it can hold up to this Pirate Warrior onslaught, because honestly, it's going to be a very similar story to what we've seen previously from matchups against Face Hunters and Shadow Priests and so on in the past. It seems like you're going to have to get one of those very, very rapid brute starts. But if anything, Gia, I feel like Pirate Warrior has more game to come back against those huge brute boards than many of the older aggro decks from expansion past would have.
Absolutely, even beyond the Lord Barov. Just shiver their timbers. A lot of the time you'll have minions on board to support that 5 damage and get to the 8 health breakpoint or higher, depending on philosophies, that you need to get rid of brutes. And after those brutes are dealt with, this brute Demon Hunter then just relies on Lion's Frenzy to get the damage done. And this is still Warrior. They're not pressing hero power every single turn, but that armor can be a big breakpoint later on if the game plan is all on that weapon for DragonMan. Also worth noting that to make room for the Soul Shear and Spirit Jailer version, there's no Immolation aura in this list. So Swidz also has the capability of just running away with the early board and not letting it get answered. The South Sea Captain does lend itself to that game plan, but is that a little bit too flimsy to a weapon that's already on board? I feel like it's the only option really into Coin Stonewall.
Yeah, I kind of agree. There's nothing Swidz can really mess about with too much. The stage dives are still some way away from being relevant in this spot. And so it's just kind of Pirate Warrior in a nutshell, right? You kind of just have to get those early quest steps going.
Even just using Provoke to get rid of the Crimson Sigil Runner. Very aggressive usage from Swidz. Does not want to give DragonMan the breakpoint of hero power plus the 1/1 to get rid of the South Sea Captain. He's forcing DragonMan to have Soul Shear, essentially, to deal with this Captain. And for DragonMan, I guess he's just not really bothered about dealing with it. It's more about progressing the quest and finding the brutes. There's one. There's two.
That's an acrobatics draw. He hit Philosophy Brute of acrobatics. Are you joking?
Oh, no,
That's a no. Why would you do this? DragonMan, you were the chosen one. The game bruted you.
Flashback Soddle. We've seen this happen so many times on broadcast where they forget that Spirit Jailer is also a demon. And the philosophy, if you've not gotten the brute to 0 and it's just on par with the Spirit Jailer, then you don't have a guarantee of copying the brute. That is a disaster. Just a matter of formality for Swidz to clear this off.
Okay, now I've reassembled my brain and picked it up off the floor and put it back in my head. Like, so was that a situation that could be played around, or is that just a 50-50 that DragonMan missed in that position? Could he either discount the brute again by 1 more, or get rid of the Spirit Jailer first? I don't think he can get rid of the Spirit Jailer first, right? Because he was on exact mana by the time he played anything else out.
Yeah, I honestly have to go back and check, but there was a double jump somewhere in that turn. I'm not sure if it happened before the philosophy or after, but if it was a 0 cost double jump that happened before the philosophy, then that was a disaster. You sometimes get baited by trying to outcast the philosophy, but you don't care about the +1/+1 if it's gonna give you a 50-50 to not copy the good thing anyway. Right. But here we go, DragonMan still in this, right? The brutes are the first half of the win condition, but they're still just completing quest, getting Lion's Frenzy, and having some other minions to shore up the damage, because as it happens, the Spirit Jailers are also pretty relevant in this situation.
Yeah, DragonMan is still just simply winning on board in this position. Can choose to hero power down a 4-1 here if he really wants to, and he is going to. He still has multiple stacks of Spirit Jailers built up in hand to support that Lion Frenzy at some point down the line, and he still has tons of health to play with, and Swid's hand is really not putting together anything that's dumping significant pressure onto DragonMan here.
You can pick up the other Anchorman guaranteed with the stage dive, but that's 5 mana only available, so he can't play it. There's just nothing strong on curve here, I don't feel like. Might even be a Tempo Samuro. I don't really hate the sound of that, because it's not as though Brute Demon Hunter is trying to go super wide with small minions. Looks like he's reaching for the Hatchet, which would give him a 50-50 of buffing the Samuro, which then allows it to clear both minions. But the question of if you go Hatchet, there is still what do you hit, right? Because if you miss the 50-50, you would rather have killed the 1-1, I suppose, here, and then just play like the Bloodsail Raider and get your Anchorman in hand with the stage dive.
Yeah, it depends how committed you would be to playing the Blade Master anyway, I suppose, because obviously you can still then run it out as a one-attack minion, but if you're going with this line, then I suppose, yes, this attack is going into the 1-1. He's choosing to guarantee the Blade Master hit, not take the flip. Very, very deliberately, even going as far as to play the stage dive last to not land that buff on the Stonewall Anchorman.
I like this. Not super relevant, the Samuro in the face of a Kurtrus, but maybe to clean up the other Spirit Jailer that he would know is in hand by this point. DragonMan already has the Lion's Frenzy in hand, and honestly, for all our sakes, I hope he could slow down a little bit. Like, I mean, he's very emotive, right? The tilt, I don't know if that was a factor of him playing too fast is what caused the mishap with the philosophy, or if it was just his usual pace and he had a blank out moment. But with Lion's Frenzy, you need to be very, very careful to make sure that you actually have enough damage to close out the game. Over on Swidz' side, though, it looks like a pretty simple Anchorman turn, even though leaving up Kurtrus feels pretty terrible.
So you just want to Anchorman, value trade, go face with everything else from this position, leave the 7-7 up?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. I think your win condition is probably just saying like Lion's Frenzy, bottom 5 cards or whatever. Like, I actually don't know how small DragonMan's deck is at this point, but that will have an impact. If there's kind of a world where you're guaranteeing that he's going to get through his deck, you might be forced to play a little bit too defensively in this position, but we shall see.
Doesn't hit Kurtrus. I mean, if one of those cannon hits had gone into Kurtrus, I would consider giving up the card draw from the Frenzy to just get rid of the 7-7. But without that option, Swidz is all about the face game plan, taking his Frenzy draw, and now DragonMan is in business. Fragments drawn, studies off the top. Nothing great from the studies, but I just don't want to see him take too much time on this decision. You take the Kurtrus and ignore it, I think. Yeah.
Agreed, yes. Interesting as to whether 1 to 2 mana is worth spending on Spirit Jailers here with the way he's setting this up to get extra Soul Fragments in the deck for extra 0 mana draws, essentially. He is just continuing to draw cards without it for now. The way the rest of the deck is stacked, this is looking pretty solid for a Alliance-friendly turn.
Yes, not very friendly to Swidz, unfortunately, but even at the end of this, there's still the other Brute. There's still Lions into Glide that can be played for DragonMan, and that Glide will give him back like 0 cost acrobatics at this point. Oh, sorry, you'd lose the first discount, but other draw effects for very cheap. But there's not that much time left remaining. Okay, he's safe though. He's got the Brutes down.
Yeah, which I think was a pretty decent way to approach the turn here, right? He wasn't super focused on finding immediate lethal there because he knew he didn't really need to have it. So in the end, he just chose to focus on finding that other Brute, make sure the Philosophy was dropped on that. You can see that quite deliberately. He got the other Spirit Jailer out of hand without using the Philosophy, whereas the direct lethal route would have been to Philosophy the Spirit Jailer to put more Soul Fragments into your deck. Just giving himself this security, this extra turn. He's at 26. He doesn't need to worry about this scenario. In the Battlegrounds terms, as I've been casting for the last week or so, damage cap's still active. He can't die this turn. Just keep milking. He's fine.
Yep, that Lion's Frenzy. I'm trying to come up with a milking analogy here, but I guess things are dying, so that's kind of like Avenge. And the Frenzy's going to deal lethal the next turn. Pretty strong stuff. You know, I think just the call to bring a Lion's Frenzy version is pretty clever and on par with a lot of the weapon rogues that we're seeing as opposed to Garrote rogues, because Demon Hunters are cutting Rust-Rot Vipers in favor of Need for Greed, and that was the scariest thing into these decks that are quite reliant on these weapons as part of their win condition. But now that that's been cut for the most part, maybe there is room for Brute Demon Hunter to come back to play.
Cute attempt at the very least. Nice little interaction from Swidz. Obviously, the minions were too big for him to really sink his frenzy into. You're used to Blade Masters being buffed symmetrically, but that was just an attack buffed Samuro, so it couldn't attack into the brutes to still activate frenzy. So he shivered its timbers just to take a look at the board state to see if he could actually get enough through it at that point. Still wasn't able to do anything relevant, and that is a super, super quick 2-0 going up to DragonMan. No, don't look, don't watch the replay. You don't need to know about anything apart from the fact that DragonMan is 2-0 up. That's all you need to know, okay?
But I wanted to know if there was a way to guarantee the brute coffee.
Oh, true. Yeah, good point. Good point.
If I watch the replay of the replay later when we're not live, I will find out. But for now, the thing that we need to focus on, and DragonMan in particular, is his last remaining deck, the Garrote Rogue, which at the beginning of the series you were talking about more in the context of Swidz playing it, right? You have mentioned that Swidz has been notorious in Grandmasters at some point for making some game-losing blunders, and this is a culprit that has been the bane of even many top players' existence. So easy to mess up, and even more so now where the Garrote breakpoints are even fewer and far between because you only shuffle 2 bleeds into your deck. Generally, the rule of thumb is that you want 3 spell damage rather than just 2 to deal the lethal from 30, but again, there are a lot of matchups where it's not quite from 30. It could be from higher if there's armor involved, or from lower if you've gotten minion damage in the mid game.
Yeah, and we also saw with the way Garrote Rogue was evolving, when Guild Trader came into the deck, for example, suddenly then everyone was like, I mean, Shadow Step my field contact, I don't care. What, I need to Shadow Step this Prize Plunderer to clear your board? I don't care. I have +2 damage from my Guild Trader. It's just 1 card left remaining in my deck, which is going to enable my OTK with the Garrotes and Bleeds if I get that down that deep into the deck. Now, as you're saying, you need at least that 1 extra spell damage on top of that to get that going, which puts us back into this scenario, which I think we talked about way more in the early days of Garrote Rogue, which is, can I afford to use my spell damage card here to cycle? Can I afford to use my Shadow Step to actually get some value out of it that way? Because you do need to be a lot more greedy in certain positions, particularly when you're up against a class that, even though it's one of the most aggressive decks in the game, still manages to accidentally stack a good amount of armor in quite a few games in the face of the Quest Warrior on the other side.
Yeah, whether it be through pressing the button or just sticking an early cargo guard, it is kind of an annoying minion for Rogue to deal with. The 4 damage breakpoint just outside of the range of Brain Freeze. Maybe takes 1 too many procs of Prize Plunder to get rid of cleanly, and it's right here entered the hand for Swidz. And if that sticks around for too long, that can provide some major breakpoints that Rogue cannot reach. Swidz going to start by coining out the deckhand though, which allows him to get the hatchet online, and that curves cleanly into Harbor Scam, into Cargo Guard, into quest completion stage 1. Very nice the way that the Warriors' tools for quest progression are so cheap that you can piece them together in so many different ways and spend all your mana and be happy about it.
DragonMan is an eager Hearthstone player, I can say that much. He was already going through the motions of the turn he thought he was going to play before the turn came anywhere near passing back to him. He was already moused over Penflinger, Prep, Swindle, Penflinger, just lining up perhaps what he wanted to use to answer this. Could again... Wait, yeah, no. What's happened? Okay, fine.
No, I think Swidz was saying, isn't that a mistake? And I kind of agree. I thought DragonMan was going to slot in Penflinger again before he went for this swindle. Yeah.
Right. He left himself in a position after the fact where he would either have to use a spell damage minion, which we've already talked about, you don't really want to be doing that, or leave a Penflinger on the board for no reason. But he could have just shoved it back in the middle of the 2 spells that he cast and got it back to his hand. Very strange.
Yeah. Overeager, going back to your original point, and he's taken 2 extra damage so far for it. It's going to be even more potentially later on. We'll see if that comes back to bite DragonMan, but at least in terms of like how do you pivot after you've made an error, he deemed it more important to have a battle cry in hand, even at the cost of leaving a 2-1 on the other side of the board, rather than just clearing a minion. And because he's gotten field contact, I guess the hedge around your mistake is going to be slightly rewarded here, but obviously it's not ideal.
Octobot again. Looks like it's going to incentivize DragonMan to hold on for some amount of time here. Just going with the secret passage. Does pick up Penflinger again. Hopefully he is taking the full time to evaluate the situation here. Yep, Penflinger back down. Looks good to me.
So the flinger is happening at the end of this turn deliberately now, or he's just going ethereal. I feel like DragonMan does things and then he thinks about what are the consequences. Because you can kind of think to yourself, right? If I'm okay with leaving a minion naked on the board at the end of this, then sure, let's see what's in the shroud before we do that. But now he's thinking, am I actually okay with that? And the turn has become slightly more awkward because of it. In the end, he's just going to step the Ethel back, which does work out in such a way where it doesn't seem like anything was a mistake. I'm just concerned about the pace of things and the timing at which he pauses.
I don't know whether it's just narcissism or what, but there's something about someone else just using my dumb names for cards that just amuses me endlessly.
Wait, Derek and I named Ethel. You and Raven named Gordon. Yes.
Okay, did you have Ethel?
Yes.
You did Gordon. Okay, all right.
Yes.
Then I apologize. And instead, that is just a straight compliment that Ethel is very funny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, contact Octobot Ethel can happen. 4 cards can then cost 0 after that, but looks like he is not going for Octo necessarily. He could go for it at the end of this turn or just hold it all together. I don't know, I thought this was a pretty decent looking Octobot turn. He could have gotten way more out of this field contact.
Yeah, that is very fair. Certainly had things lined up nicely to be able to get that done. But he still was in a position where he could have a reasonable turn with field contact and mostly 1 and 0 mana cards. And then perhaps that's his thinking, is to refill the hand again with a bunch of new cards to discount and then use the second Octobot to get that done instead.
That is true, and I was just, again, advocating for another usage of spell damage that is not in the lethal assumption was that getting more stuff on board would then allow DragonMan to not need all the breakpoints because he could push some minion damage, but that's not necessarily true because of cards like this Cannoneer from Swidz, which allows for some non-guaranteed but relatively consistent board clearing potential off of these small minions from Rogue. And now Swidz can continue, I suppose, just pushing face and press the button here. Not ideal, but I feel like if I were Swidz, I'd not be overly threatened by this. He has a ton on board.
Yeah, I suppose options here are whether you want to use the Provoke just to clear one small minion, as we've seen players do on multiple occasions in spots like this, and just really incentivize that ability to go face, whether even he wanted to tradable the Provoke in that position instead of gaining the armor. But as we've already discussed, the armor does have some outside utility in this matchup in terms of making DragonMan's eventual lethal a little bit more difficult.
Neophyte coming down for DragonMan. Not quite a field contact turn. It looks like just gonna let rip with the passage with the 3 mana remaining. I think that's a good hedge here. Doesn't hit very much cycle though. In fact, it is a complete brick of a passage with the double Garrote seen this early. Definitely not ideal, and that Shadow Step is probably too precious to just use on a Prize Splendor. Again, he needs to save that perhaps for the Ethereal Aug Merchant to get enough spell damage rolling for the lethal combo. Swidz though, let's see how he can capitalize on the relatively slow turn from DragonMan. It's a bunch of these reactive cards, but maybe the Cargo Guard's armor can help him survive for just a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think so. Likely the way this pan out. Like, Samuro, technically, he could have like a full tempo turn where he actually gets to go face with everything if he wants to play the Samuro, but I don't really see too much value over that overall. I think getting the Cargo Guard down, starting to stack up that little bit more armor does make sense because, yeah, DragonMan on the other side is scrapping for resources right now. We already saw one Shadow Step get used to get that Ethereal Aug Merchant back into hand from the Secret Passage in the first place. He can't really be going about throwing a second one out willy-nilly, especially now he's seeing Cargo Guard number 2 hit the board as well.
Just a matter of whether Swidz wants to commit the Provoke as well to remove all of the pressure from DragonMan's side of the board. I think he's been keeping track that there's only one Shadow Step left. So again, I wouldn't be too scared of this Prize Plunderer being left around. But then again, I can't think of many things you'd rather save the Provoke for anyway. Okay, well, here we go. Here's the contact turn. Flurry's pretty nice. Picks Biscuit though.
Biscuit's pretty huge as well, yeah.
True, that is plus mana if you manage to discount the first half of the spell, but wait. So he just use, okay, he just got rid of it. I thought he was gonna Octobot this turn so he'd actually gain mana from the Biscuit, but he just created hand space by doing this.
So that means essentially he took 0 mana do nothing instead of 0 mana freeze 2 minions, right? Which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
I guess it was 0 mana buff your Prize Plunderer by 2 points of...
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. That is very true, yeah.
So he now has also Shadow Step to deal with the 3/4, but again, he held on to this Shadow Step on the passage turn, or at least he let it go back to his deck because he thought he might still need spell damage, but now he's shifted more back to a board-based game plan, losing some of his breakpoints with every Shadow Step / Ethel used, and this is kind of what Swidz wants to see because he has the Samuro to punish the board-based game plan.
Indeed, yeah, and I think this is where DragonMan's head is largely at here. He knows that straight-up combo victory is going to be quite tricky from this position, so he's trying to make these annoying board states to try and build things up. Of course, DragonMan, with that Ethereal Org Merchant in hand, costing 0, he does still have the Guild Trader remaining as well on top of this, right? So that is still the 3 spell damage that you would conventionally need to secure an OTK against your opponent. It's just a matter of how much armor Swidz can then stack on top of that.
That's right, because the 3 spell damage on all of the Garrote procs is just 30 total damage, right? Essentially, each Garrote going up to 5 spell damage, and now that you only shuffle 5 total damage, and now that you only shuffle 2 bleeds in, it's 6 total procs for the perfect 30. However, DragonMan with the 1 Thief used, I'm really concerned about where he can pull this extra damage out from. We're already seeing 33 is the breakpoint for Swidz right now, and he can keep pressing the button every single turn. Gonna leave the 1 Thief around. I think that's fine. We've seen both Shadow Steps, right? So it's not like it's gonna come down and generate a fireball out of nowhere. There's a weapon that can be a bit more damage, but not quite enough.
Oh, interesting. Guild Trader from Shroud of Concealment as well at least ticks through your brain in terms of vague possibilities of something you might be able to do to make something happen, because mana constraints are going to be very real over the course of a couple of turns here with the Garrotes, the Guild Trader, everything else that he needs to be able to get this done.
Right, because he still needs a draw effect to actually get to the bleeds. Sorry, we're not aware of what is this last card for tradable or something that can draw him. Then he can get all the bleeds drawn at the same time. He has the 3 spell damage, and he's representing the 5 if sort of, yeah, not guaranteed 5, right? It's on a minion that's stealth and then the weapon, but that entire plan is foiled by the taunt. So Swidz finally taken down a win on the board.
Yeah, and Swidz actually spent quite a long time on what looked like a fairly simple turn on the previous turn. And I think those are the kind of things he was breaking down, because he had the option to go with the Sword Eater plus Provoke, for example, instead of just holding on to the Samuro. So I think he was just breaking down by exactly what was left in his opponent's deck, what their damage range was, but also what their board range was, right? Like, could they build a board that he wasn't able to deal with? Would he be better off preserving the Samuro to deal with that theoretical board in the future? Or would the Taunt actually be relevant? Because Taunt actually is a little bit relevant now when it comes to late game scenarios with Rogue, because they do have that tiny bit of extra finishing damage that can come from the Cutlass in those scenarios. But Swidz at least now will be happy not to get 3-0 swept in that position. He does have a win with the Pirate Warrior on the board, and it might just come down to the way this series is going, Gia, who is going to be able to pick up a win in a Garrote Rogue mirror if we get all the way down to it.
Very exciting stuff. And in that particular matchup, I feel like that's one of the ones where the nerf to Garrote is least relevant because I do find it is more based of a board battle. It can, of course, get down to the combo a bit later on, but you don't generally need the full combo in the Garrote Rogue Mirror because any damage you stick with your minions is going to be, I suppose, Wand Thieves generating ice barriers or something pretty wild like that. But in the list from Swidz, there's not even Wand Thieves to begin with. It's just the goods. He's got the 2 copies of sorry, only the 1 copy of Penflinger, but the double Neophyte still. I see that's a card that's been cut quite a lot to make room for Cutlass, especially because it's one of those battle cries which is even more expensive, right? It doesn't go straight down to 0 with 1 Octobot and thus feels a bit more clunky sometimes with field contact, but I find it's an amazing card in the mirror, whether just dropped on curve to start pressuring and denying things like Swindle and Shroud of Concealment, or if it's at the late game to deny your opponent if they have telegraphed that they're going for a Garrote lethal later on.
Yeah, this is a conversation we had yesterday when we were testing some matchups. I kind of brought up the idea in a Conquest tournament. Let's say you're banning OTK Demon Hunter. Does cutting Cult Neophyte from your decks actually make sense? And I think now that we actually have the luxury of seeing the lists that have been submitted, I think I would still like Cult Neophytes in quite a lot of my decks when we've seen the ton of Druid that we're seeing in various forms where Cult Neophyte is an absolute monster against alignment Druids most of the time. But also just Mizaki Mage rearing its ugly head in bigger numbers than we thought we might be seeing otherwise.
How dare you call it ugly? The deck is beautiful, Sato.
I saw a beautiful 80 damage self-overkill earlier, so yes, I am inclined to agree with you.
Well, both of our players' hands have their merits here. Swidz does have the dynamic duo of Octobot, Field Contact, and the Shroud to really juice it. But DragonMan has even more card draw available to him, and the curve works out a little bit cleaner as well. Being on the coin also gives him more flexibility, I suppose, for the timing of when he actually wants to discount these things. The early game as it happens, so we're not seeing the pan out of the mirror that happens to be more board based. This is going to be who gets the bigger field contact turn and possibly whose field goes second, right? Because whoever pops off first is going to have to be using their battle cries of 1 damage on their own stuff to keep the train going, whereas the responder can actually get good usage out of their battle cries, but it depends if they get enough of a response.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is very interesting when you start to get into the very, very, very best players playing this mirror, is the mantra of, like, just because I can do something sick with field contact this turn doesn't necessarily mean I should do something sick with field contact this turn, because you do sometimes have to tie those two things together and use that as a responsive turn with your opponent popping off. But then again, if you just sit there waiting too long, you don't have efficient other ways to spend your mana, not popping off with your field contact is kind of just giving initiative over to your opponent in that regard as well. So I do think it's a very difficult line to walk in this matchup. And I think all Garrote Rogue matchups have a certain amount of difficulty to them. But I certainly think the Rogue is, the mirror even, is very, very intricate.
And one of the big...
Initiating overdrive.
But Swidz also has to think about this turn, like, do I have to step it to protect it? It's relatively protected by the Divine. It's kind of a win for Swidz also, but he doesn't want to take the risk, just making sure that he can get that discount again at a future turn, and ends up with a middling quality secret passage, just gonna delete the Garrote Rogue from, sorry, not the Garrote Rogue, the, I thought he was going to delete the prep from his deck, but ends up letting it go back in, so he just gets the Blackwater exchanged for an Octobot to the original hand. So looking pretty decent to pop off with field contact.
That's an upgrade. Probably.
DragonMan going to respond in kind now, at least with the setup turn with the Octobot. No Shadow Step luxury on his side, but he is going to set up for that field contact turn. But Swidz now is going to have the first major pop-off if he can get a nice sequence of draws here. Already has enough value using this Octobot that he already has to discount the Octobot in hand as well that costs 2. This could be a pretty monstrous turn if he wants to put it all together. And again, in this matchup, don't worry too much about hoarding combo pieces and setting up for the OTK. Like, generally the winner in this matchup will be whoever is able to be significantly ahead on tempo for a significant amount of time. But Swidz now looking like he's going to go one more time with the Shadow Step as well. Already has his other natural Octobot in hand that he's discounted down once. So he does have to consider how this turn is going to pan out here.
Yeah, that would be the last Shadow Step used, but technically okay because he does have a very cheap Guild Trader with the Ethereal Aug Merchant if he needs to do the full 30-0. And from this standpoint, doesn't even look like he needs to, right? Because he's going to have decent control of the board. He's going to force DragonMan to have to respond and get rid of all of this. Otherwise, on the very next turn with the field contact number 2 still waiting in his hand.
Too quiet.
So yeah, as mentioned, DragonMan is going to have the opportunity now to respond to this. He does have a hand of comparable quality to what Swidz was doing on the other side. He is just currently lacking his other Octobot and his other field contact. Scratch part of that now as he does pick up the other Octobot.
Getting really tense, Sottle. I don't think DragonMan has any capability of reaching lethal this turn.
No.
Because in order to play Garrote, he has to, or like, discount this hand and play Garrote. That would leave him 0 mana to work with, and he doesn't have the other Garrote currently in hand. So it's all about surviving the next turn, and that means playing Cult Neophyte, giving Swidz the hardest time to accomplish his own lethal and buying yourself that extra turn to get towards your own combo. Can he get rid of the field contact though? There's a prize plunder at the end of it, right on time.
DragonMan just tossing the secret passage here, seeing what else he can pick up. Does find the Shadow Step as well, which is the #1 card he was looking for at that point. Not only to potentially delete a card from the remainder of his deck, but also now just to get that repeated value from the field contact on the other side. He does go field contact there as well. I was having a brief consideration about whether he would be stepping the Octobot in that scenario, but I think the rest of his hand, yeah, now his natural hand returns. It basically all costs 0 at this point anyway. So I think having access to the field contact is a pretty decent way of going about it.
Yeah, and even though he's at 10 cards, there's nothing he cares about overdrawing here because both Garrotes are in hand. The Guild Trader is also in hand. I suppose Ethereal Aug Merchant, if that's still in the deck, is a bit scary, but let's see first for Swidz what he can accomplish. Doesn't look like very much with all of these Cult Neophyte auras in the way.
Okay.
1 bleed.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Interrupted, and no mana even to activate the tradable effects. I think Swidz will probably know what's up. Like, it seems so like we have Garrote Rogue at home these days when they start having those pop-up turns, and you just see 2 bleeds going into the deck. Like, it's so underwhelming to watch happen in comparison to the amount of damage that you could get before.
Well, Swidz just trying to hedge for the weird world where DragonMan made a mistake. Maybe he's overdrawing a Garrote on this turn, but never mind. He's just going to throw it down, doesn't believe he has any chance. And that is the series in a very quick fashion to DragonMan. And I think he will be the first to admit it was not the cleanest series. We saw 2 very distinct mistakes at 2 different games, but I think he closed it out very nicely with that Garrote Rogue Mirror.
Yeah, not the cleanest, but it sure was good fun, which I think could be the tagline of APAC GM. So if he is going to get there, I think he will. I think he will fit in very, very nicely indeed. But yeah, I mean, interesting lineup overall. The Druid, the Brute Demon Hunter, the Rogue, as you said, kind of decks that have been hanging around for quite some time. Not the revolutionary new version of those decks that we're seeing from some other people, but just kind of iterative versions where he's built on top of them with some of the mini set cards. Certainly had a couple of moments, despite me building up Swidz as the person with the penchant for a little bit of a fumble every now and again. It was on the other side that we saw some potential big blunders, but still did enough to secure another big win for himself as he tries to hunt down that APAC GM promotion spot going into next year.
All right, Sottle, you do not get to dunk on APAC because at the beginning of the series, we set it up, right? This is the deciding region, no mind towards HGI whatsoever. APAC player 1, that's all I'm gonna say about it. When we come back from this break, more round 3 action, so don't go anywhere. More Masters Tour Undercity.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back again for more round 3 action. I am Dawn, joined by the wonderful Raven. How are you doing so far today, Raven?
I'm doing really good, thank you. Yeah, it's I'm enjoying covering all these matches as usual, and I've been kind of surprised at just how the meta's been going overall. Some things I didn't really foresee happening. There was a lot of questions about Garrote Rogue, for example, but based on the information I've just been looking at, it's by far the best win rate deck so far in this Masters Tour, so that's something of a surprise, I think, followed by the likes of Paladin, Quest Warrior, Pirate Warrior, and a little bit of Hunter just about keeping in there as well. So just some decks that I didn't really see doing as well as they have. I thought they were going to be okay, but yeah, pretty impressed overall.
Yeah, Rogue has definitely been one of those very odd classes, I feel like, where we've seen kind of a mishmash of varieties throughout the day so far, but we are going to be kind of jumping in mid-series to our next series here. Why don't you walk us through what we're going to be seeing here? What do we have coming up?
Yeah, so we have Xiaoyao versus Trahison, and it's again we can look at the wins already so far. So for Xiaoyao, he's already won with his warrior, which again quest/pirate warrior, and the warlock that I actually forgot to mention is always up there, is also up there in win rate, which is just that quest handlock. But it does mean the shaman's left over, and it is going to be that quest shaman as well. So one we saw tons of in the Global Invitational, and going up against that, or what Trahison needs to do is win with his own quest warrior. Alongside that aggro paladin, which again was a deck that's kind of recently popped up. Again, of course, aggro paladin always sort of appears and then fades into the shadows, then pops up again. Which, yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of a tricky matchup really for Trahison, because these are two, I think it's safe to say you can call them both aggro decks, even though the Quest Warrior has the ability to go later in the game. But Xiaoyao is playing that Quest Shaman, which is one of like the go-to anti-aggro decks that we've seen in the meta for quite a while now, even before the mini set, even before all that. Like the original Quest Shaman was that very much deck that you'd picked if you were sick of facing those board-focused aggro decks.
Yeah, I mean, with tools like Perpetual Flame especially, but being able to maybe use a little bit of something from Overdraft or Lightning Bolt, they can definitely clear a lot on the board. There is 2 copies of Feral Spirits here in this list as well, which can kind of slow down some of that minion damage. But one interesting, or actually really 2 interesting cards kind of came from this mini set here with this Brilliant Macaw and the Multicaster. And the Multicaster adding additional draw to this deck, I feel like has just really made it feel even better and more really consistent, I think, which is something it was kind of missing.
Yeah, 100%. It is why we've seen Multicaster in so many different decks. I think I'm really glad it's a neutral card, because it gives those options for tons of different archetypes, right? Just have that sort of neutral and potentially very powerful card draw. And also the Parrot as well. Like I'm looking forward to seeing what it can do. Generally, I think it's just one of those the Fireheart procs, right? I think is a big deal. It's if you line it up, obviously you play it like a second Fireheart, which we've seen time and time again in Shaman, that if either Shaman's in a tough spot and needs digging out of it, or if they just need to find X, like any damage to win the game, Fireheart's normally the go-to recovery stage. But like I said, it's going to be an uphill climb here for Trahison, because it's to win one. Yes, you can win one unfavored matchup, of course. Like no deck is 100% in this game. But to do it 2 times in a row against a deck that's, I feel, is super consistent now, especially with the help of those multicasters in the deck, I think the odds of you actually being starved of resource in the Shaman right now, I feel is very low, and is helped out a lot by that multicaster.
Oh, absolutely. And that Parrot can trigger that multicaster effect as well.
Yeah.
We did get to see really quick there. It is going to be that warrior. I mean, Xiaoyao just has to get 1 win with the shaman. That's all it's going to take. It might be tough, but 1 win, and then it will be the end of the series. But we are seeing these game opening up here. Get to this hands in just a second, but can you kind of walk us through, what do you think in this matchup? Is there something specific that maybe Trahison or Xiaoyao are looking for specifically in this particular matchup?
Yeah, I mean, generally, if you're playing something like aggressive, especially board-focused aggression against Shaman, I do think that you are just looking for an as aggressive curve as possible. And I really like this play here from Trahison, because he had other options, right? He had loads of options to play for this turn. He coined out the cargo because it doesn't just die to a ton of the spells available to Shaman, right? The magic number being 3 damage with like Serpent Shrine, Lightning Bolt, so on, so on. So I do like this. The Captain going to buff that as well. This is a little bit weak to Perpetual Flame, but already Xiaoyao is chucking those minions in the way and forcing Trahison to trade. But in general, this, much like potentially the next matchup if we get to it, Trahison just needs for Xiaoyao to sort of whiff a little bit, which he definitely has not, based on this opening hand from him, and just really like hard curve, push tons of damage, maybe the ability to keep the device cannoneer on board for more than one turn would be really powerful. Just to push that extra cannon damage would be really huge. But just looking at this hand from Xiaoyao, it's lining up to be everything he needs. Guidance and studies for resources. He has Serpent Shrine and Overdraft for either removal or just to free up some overload as well. I don't like to call games early, Dom, but
Yeah.
this is looking rough. There's a devolving, which is fantastic as well. Ooh, it's not looking good.
Yeah, this is definitely shaping up to be a fantastic hand for XiaoYao. I mean, even that Storm Strike could potentially kill 2 different minions. Yes, there's going to have to be a little bit of damage that XiaoYao would take to face, but being able to clear off those minions, like you said, Cannoneers, potentially removing this captain, just keeping those minions off of the board as much as possible is really going to make a huge difference. And, you know, what's some extra spell damage in there as well? You know, tradable, there's more draw. Seems like it's got everything going for it.
Yeah, I'm just looking here what Trahison's going for, and I mean, easily like the freebooter looks just fine, can kill off one of the minions. Obviously the captain being sticking on board is huge because it just means that in a weird way for like AoE, like it defends 1 health always from these minions unless they're all cleared up, of course. So the captain's looking good. I do believe that's proc 1, right, to draw the weapon. So definitely nice. He can actually play the deckhand as well because it reduced the whetstone to 1.
Yeah. Going to be able to potentially give some more attack to the Stonemaul Anchorman as well, which I think at this point the Anchorman probably clears pretty much anything that's going to come out onto the board from XiaoYao, but lots of pirates. I think Sottle was mentioning earlier about how some of the warriors that we've seen today just have kind of whiffed on their pirates or really gotten a little bit stuck, but I see a lot of pirates in this hand, and this is looking pretty good in terms of being able to work towards that quest completion. But do you think it's going to be enough to kind of combat this great hand from XiaoYao?
Yeah, I want to say I hope so, just because it's just looking like it can get there. But again, now 2 Serpent Shrines, there's still the Overdraft. I will say though, because there's so many builds of this Quest Warrior right now, it's important to note that Trahison isn't playing the Rancor list. So there's like 2 less bad cards he can draw in this deck. So that's a bonus, at least in this matchup. But we are going to see a lot of this cleaned up so far here for XiaoYao, and again, it's just Trahison's been just put on the back foot every single turn. He's done 2 damage to XiaoYao so far, which is not great, especially considering there's a Canal Slogger in hand. But really, Trahison at this point, because he didn't just steamroll the early game, just has to rely on Captain Rokara to just... I don't like to use this word because I don't mean how it sounds, but try and like cheat out the game, right? Like Rokara can get some really powerful pirates to just push loads of damage, or can get very powerful weapons as well. The amount of times I've been gore howled in the face out of nowhere is countless at this point.
Yeah, I was looking at that potential healing from that Canal Slogger as well, and this is... It looks good. If you were playing as the warrior, we're looking at this hand, this is fantastic, this is great, but as the player, these players can only see their hand. They don't know what the other player has, and there just seems like so many resources for XiaoYao, and even finding additional draw and spell damage for cheap, finding heal, now picking up this Wand Maker, can be able to find...
Oh, another...
How about
devolving.
another... Yeah, another devolving.
And
yeah.
one of the problems is like Warrior can definitely win matchups just based off a good set of Captain Rokara, right? But the problem here is by the time Trahison gets to that, I think XiaoYao's just going to have enough resources to take down like 1 pirate a turn and like 1 weapon a turn. I think the Trahison might just be, or might end up running a little bit dry of actual threats, because after Rokara's been played and you've completed your quest, you're happy, a lot of the draws now, because of how the decks are built, 2 mana 2/2, 3 mana 3/4, and like although they have some additional effects, those are shapes of minions that Shaman is very capable of dealing with as long as the resources are there. Xiaoyao does only have overdraft for a tradable right now, so he is running a little bit short, especially because some of these are going to be dealt with. I'm sure he would have liked to keep hold of some of this board so he could get that Vivid Spores down. But as you mentioned, right, well, I mean, there you go. Note Taker now basically adds an additional spell. There's Fireheart. It's just too much. If you line up just these hands, it's not enough. And then by the time Rakara hits the board, Xiaoyao, I think, will still be in control of this game.
Yeah, it's definitely looking a little bit favored, which is kind of interesting. We were talking about how much kind of pressure this warrior can put out, but maybe there can be enough kind of chip damage pushed through from Trahison's side, and maybe to close out the game with a top deck Mr. Smite is a possibility. But maybe if it gets to that point, like you were talking about with completing that quest, getting the quest reward out on the board, trying to get something, but there's not generally a lot of heal outside of the Canal Slogger. So if XiaoYao pushes through all of this removal and spells in hand currently, maybe it isn't enough.
Okay, Athletic Studies could get him something important here. He might not need it right now because I'm guessing I'm not sure where he is on the quest actually at this second in time. So that's going to be the that's going to be the captain. I imagine he just throws Rakara down right now, get it done. Athletic Studies can help. He has Cargo Guard for some sustain, but I do think the problem might be is just because this board can just be dealt with already with the Canal Slogger trade. There's a Feral Spirit, that it just might not be enough. And then there's Fireheart as well. Looks like he's going to go for Vivid Spores, and the biggest problem here is the chip damage can get you there in some instances, but because XiaoYao is already wide on board and now has Vivid Spores, for a start, those cannons are most likely, that cannon every turn is likely to just hit a minion, right, and not really push through. This double heal from Canal Slogger is going to put XiaoYao more or less back up to full health, and there's still just a Fireheart in the pocket ready to pull some shenanigans out the bag later on.
Yeah, I think if there was any chance of Trahison kind of turning the game at that point, the double Canal Slogger is really turning that back for XiaoYao, but making sure he's really thinking this through here, deciding how he wants to hit. But I do like this of taking advantage of that heal, like you said, going back basically up to full, and now there are tons of resources here. There's a Mr. Smite!
Okay, yeah, Trahison, I agree. I would have also responded like that if I sniped the Canal Slogger and just ripped a Mr. Smite, because now it means all his pirates he gets to play with his full 8 mana have charge. That is a huge deal, and this is one of those instances where we were talking about, right, where like sometimes the Rakara's ship just gets there, right? It just pulls something big out of the bag. The weapon, to cleanly kill off the first half of that taunt. He's just got to work out exactly what the best way to spend his mana is. I'm already a little bit surprised. I mean, he's probably made these trades in his head, but I was a little bit surprised he didn't go for Athletic Studies a little bit earlier, just to see what his options were.
Job's done.
Yeah, didn't really leave himself a lot of mana to potentially play something that came off of that Studies, but maybe it didn't matter because, like you said, maybe he just kind of already had it figured out in his head. So he played out those pirates first and then said, okay, now I'll just see whatever I can find here. Which finding a rabbit is going to help quite a bit for this Feral Spirits. You can see Trahison even nodding. It seems like maybe he was anticipating that. And because of the discount as well, sets himself up really nicely to play the rabbit here this following turn to clear out almost this whole board that XiaoYao just played out.
Yeah, not really a minion you normally pick off Athletic Studies, but I do think with the fear of charged call on XiaoYao's side, it was a good pickup, right? Because he has enough pirates to follow up with. He has other turns that aren't Darkmoon Rabbit, but just in case a huge charge call minion was played out that turn, it was just a nice choice there to have a backup plan, because I think if there was a big charge call, that may well just push Trahison right out the game there and then. If he didn't have the rabbit, of course.
Yeah, and maybe he's still considering that, and he's okay. No, I was going to say maybe he's still considering it to even just wait. But it seems like with the direction this game has now turned around, only 2 cards now in hand for XiaoYao. And the board has turned over for Trahison. Weapons every turn, pirates, there's things in hand. There's the charge call. I do wonder if he really was holding out and really debating if there was a different way to try to clear that board without using the rabbit.
Yeah, so the problem was, like, I like the rabbit pick, but I think if Trahison didn't see charge call that turn, he's just gone, well, I could clear the board and then keep fighting for board with the Juggernaut and all the minions you have in hand. So I think it's just unlucky, right, where, like, charge call wasn't played, so he thought, okay, I can use the rabbit. Then charge call gets drawn that we can see. With Brakan as well now on board, this charge call combined with Fireheart is likely to swing this game back around. On the surface, it looks like Trahison's in a good spot, especially with Shiver pick up there. He can actually deal with this Brakan very easily right now, but still, we can see what's in the tank here for Xiaoyao, and it doesn't look good for Trahison.
Yeah, and it's kind of amazing watching this game go back and forth, because it really does feel like it's almost, at least from the perspective of just looking at the hands, that it's potentially anyone's game, but it does feel like Xiaoyao from the start has really just had a hold on this game, and Trahison has really just been trying to fight this uphill battle and just claw as much as he can to try to keep this board, take back the board, but...
A good pickup. He can play Revolve first, right, and then charge call after. Revolve still, it does keep the chain going, even though Fireheart's not on board anymore, technically. The effect is still live, so he can keep chaining if he wants to. He didn't cast a spell last turn, right? So that torrent won't be active. I believe, I could very easily be wrong. I've been known to be wrong a couple of times in the past. But I think the Brakan was procced with the Zapper, right? So I don't think a spell was actually played last turn. Otherwise, I think he would have just snap-picked the torrent there to just kill off the Tazdingo.
Another happy guild?
There's little time.
Start with the tradable.
Petrol probably doesn't really do enough even with the double cast. I think he has to be a little bit scared. Oh, he's going for Serpent Shrine. Oh, wait. Yeah, this is fine.
So, yeah, another Discover effect. Insta-picked there, taking the overdraft. Gonna get additional Discover?
How was it?
Okay.
That was a little bit scary. I guess he's confident on 15, but I guess I'm just always nervous about Gorehowl just coming out of absolutely nowhere. But I did wonder whether the Serpent Shrine, even though it looked safer, he got a wider board, but he didn't even get a wider board, right? He killed one minion instead of playing Charge Call to get two big minions. I don't know. I'm pretty sure his charge call is on 10 right now. So I'm really shocked he didn't go for it that turn. He got more value from the Fireheart, but he could have just done the charge call turn, and I think that would have actually just pushed Trahison out the game.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think also with the potential of the actual Mr. Smite from the deck, plus a potential large weapon, it felt like a risk. It felt like a risk. Maybe
this could be lethal, right?
But
okay, 2 minions.
No.
Oh, if 2 of those hit face, that would have been the steal. Oh well, okay.
No chance. Here we go.
Charge call. You cannot hold this card any longer right now. Outside the null. Oh, okay, wait, Deathwing. Colossus, yeah, that's what you're after. And probably wants, Bunny Colossus.
The rabbit or a second null.
Because he can trade into the taunt on the far left, right? And then just bunny down the 3 minions left of the Juggernaut.
Yeah.
Went for another Deathwing.
He's gonna go for the Perpetual Flame.
I guess, this always works, right? Yeah, this is fine. Yeah. This still wins the game, right? Because if it stops like it does now, it casts again, and then everything's at 3 or less. So, yeah, this definitely works, pushes tons of damage, and now Trahison has 3 health on Xiaoyao. Juggernaut and a dream.
Oh, one of them went face.
But that's just not enough now, right? 2 Deathwings, 2 Colossus.
Yeah,
looks like that's going to be the game. But I do think, congratulations to Xiaoyao, of course, for winning. But I do think he was a little bit adventurous with some of those turns. I think he could have got that charge call down previously and felt much safer and not had it come down to, I hope the cannons don't hit me in the face, right? That felt like a little bit too risky from him, but still, good win for Xiaoyao.
Yeah, definitely. Could have turned out a little bit differently, and you never know. Every turn, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but there's always that threat of the Mr. Smite coming out as well, whether it's from the deck or even coming out like we saw previously from that quest reward. So I feel like that's always a threat, but
yeah, and
decided it wasn't enough.
Good to know as well, Trahison is in the runnings for the promotion as well. He's currently, I believe, leading the APAC leaderboards in terms of points. So even though he's took a loss here, it's not the end of the world, right? He goes down to 2-1, but that's still very doable to move forward through the tournament and just clutch out in the rest of the Swiss round. So a good game overall. I do think Xiaoyao got away with some shenanigans there that he was pretty fortunate to do so, but he did put himself, as we entered this series on this game, in an advantageous position, right? Because as we were saying before we even started this game, that he had Quest Shaman versus 2 aggro decks, which is generally where you'd like to be in any given tournament match, right?
Yeah. Well, there's the end of that game that we saw previously. But yeah, again, like you said, congratulations to Xiaoyao. But we are still actually going to have one more match to show really quickly, just the final game here. But we are almost 3/4 of the way through today. Like you said, lots of chances still to get some wins. There's plenty of games more tomorrow, as well as one more round after this one. But I recognize these names. We've got some more well-known players here.
Yeah, you get ready for some premium Hearthstone casting going on here. Have you ever cast xBlyzes by any chance, Dawn? Because you're in for a treat if not.
I have not.
Yeah, so xBlyzes, lightning speed, European player, of course, an extremely good one too, and very entertaining to watch. I do wonder if, like many of his previous days, if he's going to be playing from his void like he normally does. Normally his camera shot is just his face and then darkness all around. Going up against Turna as well, which is a player we've seen a lot from as well in the past. So it looks like both players, of course, we know we go into the final game because that's how best of fives work at 2-2. We're going to have Demon Hunter versus Warlock, and I'm just quickly pulling up the lists.
It looks like the pretty standard, I would say, quest Demon Hunter list that we're used to seeing, as well as on xBlyzes' side, the Handlock, the quest Handlock Warlock here, double Bristleback, a Viper. Pretty interesting, pretty standard, I think, for Warlock as well, though. But I feel like Viper is something that we haven't actually seen a lot yet, at least in our broadcast matches today. So I'm kind of really interested to see how this affects this match. Is it going to be used at all? Is it just going to be used for tradable? Get rid of it.
I'm going to let you down just a little bit, because I think actually they're the other way round. I believe it's going to be xBlyzes on the OTK Demon Hunter and Turna on the Warlock. I'm confusing myself now. But anyway, let's get to it. But Turna, of course, top 4 Masters Tour Ironforge, and just some great results, and looking to get sort of back in the spotlight for Turna here. So again, with that Mr. Druid, which is by far my favorite name for a deck ever in Hearthstone. So even though I hope that never changes now, I hope this deck's here to stay and we get to Worlds and someone wins Worlds with Mr. Druid. I think that's exactly what we want to see. But we are going to see the Warlock here from Turna. And again, have you played much of this sort of version with the Shadowblade Slingers, which is a fairly new addition to this list?
Probably not as much as some of these other players have gotten to, but I have gotten to. Mostly was practicing a lot after not only the mini set, but also the changes came into play. But the Slinger can just really do some work. And I think the the most critical kind of damage points that we tend to see with it are kind of the 2 damage, 3 damage, and 5 damage after things like a hero power or the backfire or a combination of. So it doesn't take out very large minions, but it still feels like it does a lot of work.
All right, Blyzes' information card has just ruined me already, as his Demon Hunter is not brute. So we'll see how that goes. But just look at that score, right? Like 63.6% win rate in previous Masters Tours. Of course, Blyze is the owner of that crown of the back-to-back Masters Tours victory, which was absolutely insane. And bringing a very solid lineup, as I mentioned when we started casting this round, Dawn, that like the Quest Warlock, Garrote Rogue, Face Hunter, and I think OTK Demon Hunter was up there. OTK Demon Hunter was just under 50% last time I looked, but still, overall, Blyze more or less running with the at least 3 of the 50+% decks right now in terms of win rate, so looking good so far.
Yes, and one of the key cards I feel like in this matchup, you can see right there on the screen, is that ever available, it seems like, Glide. It's always there. They always have it. But the Glide, very, very key card in a lot of matchups that we've seen already today, but against the Warlock as well, that's already going to be trying to build up that large hand. That's going to be very intriguing to see if Blyze can get that Glide or even a second Glide out versus this Warlock.
Yeah, it's one of those cards that, as we well know over the past few months, has become key in Demon Hunter, and it's because it has a benefit even if you can't outcast it, right? It progresses your own game plan just as much as it may interrupt your opponents, but you are completely right. Like, the Glide benefit for Blyze, as we do see, he is in his Void. Fantastic. Against Handlock specifically, or Quest Warlock, whatever you want to call it specifically, is huge, right? Because the whole point is Turna will be wanting to spam tap. I guess we should mention the elephant in the room, which is Turna is running that double Altar of Fire, which could just say a big nope to this game at any given point if Turna feels the need to go for it. So we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah, Altar of Fire has definitely been one of those very interesting cards to see. It can really take a toll on your deck, it can take a toll on your opponents, or it can just kind of end up being like, okay, sure, cool, there's 3 less cards in the deck. So it's always interesting to see what happens there, but the Neophyte, I feel like, is one of those really interesting cards in this matchup as well, just because it's in some matchups, it's something that you can say, okay, I'm fine just playing this on 2, or I kind of just want to save it for a specific thing. But how do you feel about the Neophyte up against this Demon Hunter?
Yeah, it's one of the key cards, honestly, in this matchup, right? And then we see Turna there going for the live tap instead of playing it on 2. Because I think generally, although you're expecting Demon Hunter, especially because Blyze equipped the weapon turn 1, you kind of expecting him to be able to you draw a lot of cards and prot the quest first. I think dropping it going into the likes of turn 4, turn 5 generally creates more disruption than dropping it on 2 and making them just say, okay, I'll pass 1 turn and then do all my quest after that anyway. So I do like the hold here. It, of course, goes very nicely along with this tour guide play. I'd be shocked if Turna didn't go for it right now. Yeah, there you go. And it just fits into the curve really well. He does have that backfire to keep cycling as well, but it is that weird problem that we've seen the matchup a lot with Rogue versus Demon Hunter, where Rogue will just throw things out of the hand that aren't important, or to play more of a tempo game because they are aware of Glide ruining them. And I do wonder how Turner's going to play this this backfire, or when Turner's going to play this backfire, because that just shows what you think. Okay, that's a bit easier now, but it shows what you're thinking in general, right? If he plays it, he's just acting like, okay, I don't really care about Glide. If he doesn't play it, then he is going to be very conscious of that card throughout the game.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting choice last turn as well, because I think factoring in that potential of Glide like you talked about, but also being on the coin, if Turna had just played the backfire there, it would have filled his hand, and then he would have had to use the coin or something else out anyways. So it seemed like a very reasonable turn to just go for some minions, drop that, like you said, and and say, all right, well, we're going to find out if it's that glide potential here. But now he's seen one of those glides already, has to be feeling a little bit more comfortable filling up his hand like we're seeing. And I see some potential draw here.
Yeah, it does look good. The only thing that BlyzE has to think about is this Anetheron. He just won't want to get hit for 1 million next turn. So you just got to think about whether you need to kill that. And there's the, oh, we've all been there. And Turner's feeling that more because he just saw a glide. He felt safe. But I will just wind it back a little bit where that setup from Turner was very good because he backfired straight into Anetheron, which even if he got glowed or gloated, whatever, at that turn in response from BlyzE, he still would have been able to play Anetheron. So he's still piling on the pressure, but of course that glide has slowed Turner's game plan down just a touch.
Yeah, and also made it a little bit awkward as well because put that coin into the deck, and that is not something that Turner is going to want to be actually drawing from the deck at this point either. Going to want to be finding things that are a bit more impactful than just drawing a coin that kind of does nothing at this point. But there is that one Altar of Fire here that you were talking about earlier. We're going to see what happens.
Here we go. Fine.
Better glide.
Yep, that's fine. And also we saw the Altar of Fire number 2 go from Turner, so he does know that that second one's not going to come out of nowhere. The big problem here, and again, what's been done very well, Turner's used these Neophytes to back up the turn to protect Anetheron, and BlyzE has to deal with this board somehow. He can do it. He spends the whole mana, takes the turn off, but it was a good push from Turner, right? Because that was a relatively big ask from BlyzE to be able to clear that whole board, and if not, Turner would have just taken the game.
Yeah, I think maybe reasonable for Turner to have expected the Neophytes to be cleared at least, but potentially not the entire board. But yeah, BlyzE had it. Having to even tempo out the Bristlebag.
This is where things get scary now. BlyzE is just popping off, got the Kurtrus down, and he's doing whatever he wants, and just seeing that the Bristleback was the only real play that Turner made last turn. BlyzE has to be feeling fantastic. 14 cards left in the deck for Turner, which means he's still a reasonable distance away from proccing, say, the Baron Scavengers, of which one I think he burnt. So BlyzE must be feeling very safe, and he's just looking for that card draw, which with the weapon, he can already sort of go off with next turn. He has weapon and sigil for 2 card draw, and with this Kurtrus down, I've seen BlyzE just win games from turns like this.
This is none of the key cards for BlyzE got burned from the Altar of Fire either that you mentioned, and I'm looking at that 12 cards left in deck. There's gonna be some potential, but does need the card draw like you were mentioning. There's a Slinger coming into hand. I don't know how helpful it's going to be here, though. Another Neophyte.
But he can tap. Well, he can either tap, play Slinger, and trade, or he can, he can tap, play Slinger, and actually use Touch, right, to deal the rest of the damage. Which way is he going to go? Was that just enough, or does he have to trade now? Oh, that was 8. Okay.
Yeah, after the tap. Well, that is not the draw. Nope. Okay, so BlyzE is facing down lethal damage on the board right now. And I don't know, is this going to be enough to keep him alive here?
Wait, did he... Oh, wait, yeah, sorry, he burnt the Peddler, right? So he didn't get a draw off the weapon. I forgot about that, yeah. He burnt that so he didn't get the additional tradable, which, like, in normal circumstances he would have. So that is a big deal, and BlyzE is definitely on the back foot now. I thought he still had that draw from the tradable off his weapon, but yeah, that was long gone, and Turner now... both players are kind of in a bad spot, right? Because BlyzE... Clearly, I don't need to explain much as to why he's looking rough. But Turner, although he has loads of cards, he needs the Giants to come out, or he needs Tams inactive, because he still knows that I do believe BlyzE still has the capability of just killing him, right? Like, Turner's only on 12, less so now. Like, yeah, he can heal for a bit, but the lower you get as Warlock, like, Demon Hunter can just pull an OTK out of nothing, right? Because they need such minimal damage at this kind of health.
Yeah. And I think at this point in the game, there's enough mana and that quest has been completed, right? Where it's the neophyte just doesn't feel like it's really doing anything.
Right.
So to keep getting this neophyte back off of the raised dead at this point in the game kind of feels bad. And those giants that you were talking about, 8 cards left in the deck. 2 giants being run in the list. I mean, I had to double check the list. Like, are giants still actually, are they in there? Because we haven't seen them, and neither of them got burned from that altar of fire either.
Xbylyzes just needs like an acrobatics, I was going to say, and that is just... Oh, another acro as well. There's Ilgi, and is that just in... No, it's not, right? It's not Moag or spell damage. It was looking close though, right?
Very close.
Gets to draw with the I-beam because that was the second part of the acro. There's another I-beam. There's a guild trader.
Another happy
And he's
guilty.
safe, right? He's nowhere near dead this next turn. 26 health, 6 damage showing on board. That is omega lethal next turn.
The biggest of lethals. Even Turna was just kind of shaking his head, throwing his hand up a little bit like, yeah, that's... I can't do much about it. Finally see a giant coming into hand, but you think it's too late at this point? I don't know what Turna tries to do.
Yeah, I think what he has to do now is just, he'll probably aim some of this healing at his own minions, right? Just to get some health to... well, I guess Blyze draws his deck, so he'll know he's dead, right? If he should know what's left in the deck. I didn't look at the card count and realize Blyze was at 1 card left. So I'm pretty sure Turner's just dead. He is going to just chuck some heals. Makes sense. Play the neophyte, because why not? But I do believe this is just guaranteed lethal at this point. Because he knows all these cards came after Kurtrus as well, right?
Yeah, and he should... there's, what, the guild trader left? Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. A swift nod from Turner.
Yeah.
Bit of a tricky game that, right? But Blyze did just pull it out the bag and takes the series in 3-2 fashion.
Yeah, the starting kind of couple of first turns were looking pretty good for Turna. Like you said, really set up pretty well for getting ready for a potential glide, and then setting up into a great backfire and setting up big minions. Tried to push the damage and set up really well, and it was going well until Blyze had an answer for that board. And I think after that, the whole game plan just ended up falling apart for Turna.
Yeah. I think the key turn really was Turner set up the, we might even see it, there you go, the double Neophyte Anetheron turn. This, look at 11 health, like Blyze has to pull something out here with only a few cards and the Neophyte debuff, but the fact Blyze got to that removal, I think that's where it all started to slip away. Blyze still had to get some work done, of course, just clearing the board where he could, but it gets to the point with no early giants from Turner. He was just too far behind. Like, look how much trouble or how much pressure he put on Blyze with an Anetheron. Like, if he could have played an additional giant there or had a giant follow-up straight away, things would have looked a little bit more